The first time I realized how powerless I felt was the morning I couldn't get my car out of my own garage. I stood there, keys in hand, staring at a black BMW parked sideways across my driveway like it belonged there. It didn't, it never did. And yet, there it was again, blocking my garage for the third day in a row, daring me to challenge it. That was the moment I understood this wasn't about parking anymore. It was about control. I lived in a quiet HOA neighborhood where rules were supposed to keep peace. Instead, they became weapons. Karen, my neighbor across the street, had appointed herself the unofficial enforcer. She drove that BMW like a badge of authority, always parking wherever she pleased, especially right in front of my garage. When I politely asked her to move the first time, she smiled slow and smug and said, "Relax. It's temporary." Temporary turned into weeks. Every complaint I filed vanished into HOA silence. Emails went unanswered. Meetings were postponed. Karen, meanwhile, escalated. She started waving printed HOA bylaws at me, claiming the driveway area was shared access. It wasn't. I had the property map. She knew it. But she also knew the HOA president played tennis with her husband. Whenever I confronted her, she leaned against her BMW and said the same thing. Do something about it. The stress crept into everything. I was late to work multiple times. I missed appointments. One morning I had to call a rideshare just to leave my own house. Standing on the curb, watching my neighbor block my garage without consequence, felt humiliating. The anger wasn't explosive. It was slow and heavy, like pressure building with nowhere to go. Then one evening, after another ignored email and another smug comment from Karen, something shifted. I stopped asking for permission. I stopped waiting for fairness. I started documenting everything. Photos, timestamps, emails, property surveys. I called the city, not the HOA. I learned words Karen never expected me to know. Easement, right-of-way, permits. Karen still laughed when she saw me measuring the driveway. That won't change anything, she said. She was wrong. She just didn't know it yet. What Karen didn't see was how silence can sharpen resolve. Each night I replayed every interaction, every dismissal, until the frustration hardened into focus. This wasn't revenge. It was boundaries. I wasn't trying to win an argument. I was trying to reclaim my home. And as I gathered evidence and approvals, a quiet certainty settled in. The next move wouldn't be loud. It would be permanent, undeniable, and completely within the rules she loved to quote. And once set, nothing would ever move again. The approval email arrived on a Tuesday morning. Short and clinical, but it hit harder than any argument ever had. The city confirmed my right to install steel bollards at the edge of my driveway to prevent obstruction. No HOA approval required. I reread it 3 times, not because I didn't understand it, but because after months of being ignored, clarity felt unreal. This wasn't a threat or a warning. It was permission. I didn't tell Karen, didn't tell the HOA. I kept going, through my routine as if nothing had changed. Each day, the BMW appeared like clockwork, blocking my garage just enough to make a point. Karen would sometimes linger nearby, arms crossed, watching me struggle. Other times, she acted as if I didn't exist. That confidence she carried wasn't accidental. She believed she was untouchable. Behind the scenes, things moved quickly. I hired a licensed contractor, pulled the permit, and scheduled the installation for early morning. The city inspector even walked the site with me, pointing out exact placement requirements. Everything was measured, documented, and approved. I asked one question before he left. Is there anything that would make this invalid? He shook his head and said, as long as they're not blocking public access, you're fine. They wouldn't be. The night before installation, Karen parked closer than ever, her BMW's bumper practically kissing the edge of my driveway. She caught me taking photos and laughed. Still pretending you're doing something? She said. I didn't answer. For the first time, I didn't need to. At 6:12 a.m., the sound of drilling echoed through the street. Steel met concrete, sparks flashing as the first bollard went in. By the time the sun fully rose, 3 bright yellow steel posts stood firm, evenly spaced, immovable. The contractor packed up and left. The inspector signed off. It was done. Karen's reaction was delayed, which made it worse. She came outside later, coffee in hand, phone pressed to her ear. She stopped mid-sentence when she saw the posts. Her smile faded, replaced by confusion, then anger. She walked around them, measuring with her eyes, calculating angles. For the first time, her confidence cracked. She stormed toward my door, pounding hard enough to rattle the frame. When I opened it, she was already shouting about HOA violations and unauthorized construction. I calmly handed her a copy of the permit. She barely glanced at it before snapping, "Move them! Now!" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just said no. She stared at me like she'd never heard that word before. I was at my kitchen window when it happened. Karen climbed into her BMW, jaw tight. eyes locked on the driveway like the steel posts were personally insulting her. She revved the engine once, twice, then tried to squeeze past the bollards at an angle that made my stomach drop. Metal scraped paint with a shriek that cut through the morning. The car lurched, stopped, and then there was a hollow thud as the bumper met solid steel. She slammed the brakes and just sat there. For a second, I thought she might get out and scream, but instead she hit the gas again. The BMW jumped forward, misjudged the distance, and struck the second bollard harder. This time the sound was deeper, final. Plastic shattered. Something hissed. When she finally stepped out, her perfect car wore dents, cracked lights, and a leaking pool spreading across the pavement. Neighbors appeared as if summoned. Phones came out. Someone whispered my name. Karen started yelling about traps and sabotage, pointing at the posts like they had attacked her. I stayed inside, watching quietly, hands steady, heart racing. I knew the rules, the permits, the measurements. Everything was legal. Everything was documented. Her anger didn't change physics. Police arrived next, called by Karen herself. She paced, gesturing wildly, while I calmly handed over paperwork. The officer listened, inspected the bollards, and nodded. "These are approved," he said. Karen's face drained of color. Her complaint collapsed in real time. The tow truck followed soon after, lifting the BMW away while Karen stood silent, staring at the damage she caused herself. As the street slowly emptied, I felt no triumph, only relief. Months of frustration dissolved into calm certainty. Karen had dared me to do something, and I had, not with shouting or threats, but with patience and steel set deep into concrete. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone watching understood it. Later that evening, an email from the HOA appeared, careful and neutral, acknowledging the incident and reminding residents to respect private driveways. No apology, no mention of Karen by name. That silence spoke volumes. The posts remained unbent, unmarked. My garage stayed clear. For the first time in months, I slept without anger, knowing the boundary was real, visible, and enforced. What I didn't realize then was that this wasn't the end of the story. It was the moment everything finally changed. Not just for me, but for Karen too, in ways she never expected. The days after the incident were quieter than I expected. Karen stopped parking anywhere near my driveway, choosing a spot far down the street as if distance might erase what happened. The BMW returned from the repair shop weeks later, scarred and imperfect, a constant reminder that confidence without limits can be expensive. She avoided eye contact, and when she did look my way, there was no challenge left, only resentment and caution. The HOA shifted too. Suddenly emails were answered. Rules were clarified. New notice went out detailing driveway boundaries and parking violations in careful, legal language. It wasn't an apology, but it was accountability, and everyone noticed. Neighbors who had stayed silent before began sharing their own stories about Karen's behavior. What once felt like my private battle turned out to be a pattern. Others had quietly endured. One afternoon, the HOA president knocked on my door. He spoke politely, almost nervously, and asked about the permits. I showed him everything. He nodded, thanked me for my time, and left without argument. That was the moment I understood the power shift was permanent. Not because of steel posts, but because the rules were finally being applied evenly. Karen never confronted me again. Weeks later, I heard she'd sold the BMW and was planning to move. Whether that was true or just neighborhood rumor didn't matter. Her presence no longer dictated my routine. I could come and go freely, without checking the driveway first, without bracing for conflict. The garage was just a garage again. Looking back, the hardest part wasn't the confrontation or the damage. It was the waiting, the feeling of being dismissed and powerless in my own home. Karen dared me to do something, assuming I couldn't or wouldn't. She confused silence for weakness. What she learned, too late, was that patience paired with knowledge is far more dangerous than anger. The steel posts are still there, bright and unyielding. They don't symbolize revenge or victory. They represent a line that shouldn't have been crossed in the first place. Boundaries matter. Documentation matters. And sometimes doing something doesn't mean fighting louder. It means standing firmer. Every time I pull into my garage now, I feel a quiet satisfaction. Not because someone else lost, but because I finally reclaimed what was mine. The lesson spread through the neighborhood without another word being said. And that, more than any argument, changed everything for good. If you loved watching how Karen got what she deserved, make sure to hit that like button. Drop a comment telling us your craziest HOA story. And don't forget to subscribe for more wild neighborhood dramas.